Hi, this is Ryan at Clovis Star Media. It's February 6, 2018, and this is 2 years after Lavoy Finicum was murdered by the Oregon State Police and shot at illegally by the FBI. This is important because recently the Bundy brothers and Cliven Bundy were all exonerated on all their charges, both in Oregon and in Nevada. This is significant because everybody was saying, oh, they're terrorists, they've got guns. Well, listen, first of all, they were on their own property. The BLM came to their property to try to collect money that wasn't owed to them, and they brought guns to these people's property. And then after that, they actually killed their cattle and buried them in the desert. Hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of property was destroyed by the government. And so that's why we have Second Amendment rights. Back in the American Revolution, we were fighting off the British. The British came to tax us without representation. There was a lot of tyranny. We established the Second Amendment after the Second Revolution, not just for hunting and, target practice, but to defend ourselves, not only from, possibly criminals, but our own government. And there's no reason why we shouldn't have that right in a free country to be able to protect ourselves against a tyrannical government. Everybody's complaining about, oh, Trump this and Trump that. Well, what if Trump became the next tyrant and we needed to defend ourselves? I see all these Antifa people and whatever, all these leftist people, they're now collecting guns and they're displaying it on YouTube and they're training and they're like, oh, we need to defend ourselves against our government. So anyway, that's already well established in the Second Amendment. But the point of it is that these grazing rights were bought and paid for by the Bundys, by Lavoy Finicum. And they bought them, and they had attained them from somebody who had bought them from somebody else going back over 150 years. And the BLM was only recently established, less than a century old. So I think it's 60 years old now. I think it was established, if I remember right, in the 1950s. I think it was 1954. And these grazing rights were bought and paid for long before the BLM existed. And beyond that, you look at what happened with the Bear Ear Reservoir and the Sanpete, was it the Sanpete Shelf or whatever that was in Utah? Millions of acres that Obama and Bill Clinton grabbed from the state of Utah. Big government land grab, which, thank God, Trump reversed that by and large, not completely, but by and large. And he did that based on Article 4 of the Constitution, which the property clause defines this. There's a reason why Washington, D.C. is only 10 miles in size, and that's because the property clause says so. And the property clause, Article 4, says, these enumerated rights of the government, that they can only own, things that are necessary, such as forts and ports and, things like that, but not unnecessary land grabs of millions of acres. That's not provisional in the Article 4 of the Constitution. So it's established, I think, in Section 3 here, which you can go through and look this up. And that was the Bundys and the other people in Nevada's main complaint here, is that the government's trying to take millions of dollars from them that they had never agreed to pay them, and that they weren't entitled to because these grazing rights were already bought and paid for long before the BLM was established. And so when it comes down to what happened with Lavoy Finicum, the FBI is certainly culpable for that death and for the escalation. Recently, it was found in court in these pre-trial meetings with the FBI and the Oregon State Police that the FBI told the Oregon State Police to not wear body cameras during that murder of Lavoy Finicum. It was also not disclosed by the FBI that they had shot the truck while it was moving, which is part of why the truck continued to move as the roadblock appeared, is because they had already been fired upon. 2 bullets hit the truck. There was a 17-year-old child in the truck. They knew this, and they were firing upon this truck even though they posed no danger to the law enforcement at all. The cops caused the murder, and they were culpable for the murder. And there was a reason why they told them not to wear body armor or body cameras, is because they didn't want to document their crimes. So now the FBI is under investigation for not disclosing that they had fired shots. They said that they hadn't fired any shots. When it was revealed, because of the video inside the truck, it was found that they had been shot, that the truck had been shot at, despite the lies that the FBI had told. So this is a big deal. I mean, I went out and protested. I went to prove a point at the Maine State House. I took my gun, loaded, and you can look it up on my channel here on Clovis Star. And I loaded my gun and I went down to the State House. Now, I didn't mean anybody harm. I've never meant anybody harm. I practice the non-aggression principle. But I wanted to prove, first of all, that we have Second Amendment rights for a reason. And secondly, that, carrying them is not a crime. And carrying them loaded is not a crime. And, my point during the protest was that camping isn't a crime. They went out there to camp on that Malheur Wildlife Rescue, and to make a statement that, hey, these are our lands. The BLM says they own them illegally, though, because, the Article 4 of the Constitution says they can't own that land. It's illegal for them to own that land based on the Constitution. So they were just asserting their rights under the Constitution. And I made that point. I said what they did was not illegal. Well, that's what a jury found. That's why Ammon Bundy, Ryan Bundy, and a whole lot of them there were exonerated. Now, some of them pled guilty. Instead of fighting it, instead of taking it to trial, they took these plea deals. And if they wouldn't have taken those plea deals, they wouldn't have been convicted, because what they did wasn't illegal. And that's what the jury found. Not only in Oregon, but then also in Nevada. So, them defending their land when the government came to, steal their cattle, that's what the BLM came armed with AR-15s to their land, to steal cattle. Well, not only did they steal them, but they also killed their cattle, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of personal property. They destroyed them in the desert. And that's why we have Second Amendment rights, is to defend ourselves against tyrants, whether it be government or whether it be criminals or whatever. That's what the Revolutionary War was all about. So I made that point on February 5th, 2015. I'm sorry, 2016. Yeah, it's been 2 years, so it's 2018 now. It was 2016 when I did my little protest, my little vigil, the day that Lavoy Finicum was buried. He was buried in Utah on February 5th, 2016, and that's the day that I went down to the Maine State House just to film a protest and assert my rights. Now, certainly I took a little risk. The cops could have shot me. They would have shot me illegally, because everything I was doing was legal and within my rights. Carrying a gun, even where I was at the State House, it was 100% legal, and the cops agreed with me. And I was pretty cold, so when I got there, I talked to the cops. They said, "Oh, what are you doing?" I told them what I was doing. They said, "Oh, okay, well, next time just let us know before you do it." And they said, "How long are you going to stay?" And I said, "Well, I'm pretty freaking cold. I've got all these orthopedic implants in my body. My body's built with titanium now after a car accident, so I was freezing my ass off." And I'm like, "Well, I'm done. I'm going home now." Like, "Okay, well, have a nice day." And, they knew me from around the neighborhood because, I was running drug dealers out of our neighborhood where our kids were. There was a heroin dealer in our neighborhood who ended up killing 2 people on Christmas in 2015. 2 young people, like in their 20s, a boyfriend and a girlfriend. And this guy was in our neighborhood, so he beat up one of our neighbors, our elderly neighbor. We called him Cletus. And he was like a Vietnam veteran, and walked with 2 canes. He had a broken spine or something. And they beat the hell out of this guy and robbed him. So I started carrying my gun around the neighborhood to let him know, hey, this is my neighborhood. I'm not putting up with this shit. And I went and talked to the guy that beat up the old veteran. And, the cops came, and I told him what was going on. I told him that I'm not putting up with that shit and that I'm going to be carrying my gun. So they knew who I was. We'd already discussed this before I went down to the State House. But, no, they were totally cool. The cops in Maine were totally, on board with what I was doing, and they had no complaints. They wanted to make sure who I was and if the gun was legal. But after they confirmed all that, they went on their merry way. And that was my point, is to prove that, just because they had guns on this federal property, this Malheur Wildlife Refuge, first of all, that property was obtained by the BLM illegally. It wasn't a federal government property, it was a state property, because the Article 4 of the Constitution says that can't be federal property. But secondly, even if it was federal property, it's not illegal to carry your gun out in the wilderness on some refuge. And that was my point. I proved it. And I went home. And anyway, I hope that the Finicum family gets some relief from what has happened. Financial relief. They just lost their patriarch, the breadwinner of their family, due to a FBI and police murder of this man. And, to take that out of their lives, is going to make their farm, their family, their finances suffer. And they deserve compensation. I mean, nothing can replace their father, certainly, but they do absolutely deserve compensation from the government to replace what they've lost, so that their farm and their family are able to survive. So I hope that happens. I definitely expect to see some sort of amends made in that, and the FBI agents and the Oregon police that killed this man to be punished for it. I believe one FBI officer, agent, or whatever was fired, but there was two guys shooting at that truck while it was driving, shooting at little children while they were driving down the road, and without legal justification for what they did. So that's why they're under investigation. I think Governor Brown of Oregon needs to be investigated. There's a lot of corruption out there. And if you look into it, the $150 trillion reason why they killed Lavoy Finicum, it's because on that rancher land out there in Nevada, there's a huge cache of uranium. The kind of uranium that Hillary Clinton sold to Russia. Well, they're trying to, extract that from the ground, and they need to get rid of all these farmers in order to do it. Same with Dwight and Stephen Hammond. They know that underneath Dwight and Stephen Hammond's land is uranium, and that's what that protest in Oregon was all about. And so they're going to get that uranium. That's what their intention is, and that's why they went and they're trying to run all those farmers out of that area so that they can easily extract their minerals that they want to get, so they can sell it to, who knows, Russia again, or China, or whoever. I wouldn't doubt it. Anyway, rest in peace, Lavoy Finicum. Peace.